My perfect sister didn't just lie. She rewrote our parents' will behind closed doors and painted herself as a saint while I was grieving in silence. She took everything: the estate, the legacy, even my name. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't blind. And while she paraded her charity across the world stage, I was already following the money trail, one quiet, damning breadcrumb at a time. What she never saw coming was how I'd turn her spotless image into global scandal. My sister didn't just lie. She rewrote the story of our family, line by line, until I was gone, erased like a typo no one wanted to admit ever existed. Our parents' original will had been clear. Everything was to be split equally between us. It wasn't even a question growing up. I may have been the odd one, the artist who bounced from job to job and wore paint-stained jeans to dinner, but I was still their daughter, still family. At least I thought I was. By the time they passed, the will had changed. 90% of the estate, every cent, every heirloom, every trust account, was left to the Eloise Foundation, my sister's beloved charity. The remaining 10% allocated to a discretionary account managed by the trustee. I wasn't even named, not once. At the reading, she showed up in a dove-gray dress, eyes red but dry. When the lawyer read the terms, she clasped her hands like she was praying. She spoke softly about honoring their legacy and doing good for the world. And then, right before she turned to leave, she looked at me, not with pity, not with apology, but with this slow, deliberate smile that only I could see, like she'd won something. It wasn't grief that hit me in that moment. It was the realization that while I'd been at Mom's bedside, rubbing lotion into her fragile hands, my sister had been behind closed doors, quietly stealing everything. The house, the accounts, the family name, even their faith in me. People said I was dramatic. That maybe our parents really had grown tired of my messiness. That maybe my sister had just stepped up when I wouldn't. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't see how she staged every photo, how she used compassion like currency, how she smiled while turning me into a footnote. She took my name, my family, and my future, and she thought I'd stay silent, that I'd disappear like background noise. But I wasn't finished. What would you do if the person who shared your childhood rewrote your future like you never mattered? Before you answer, let me show you what it feels like to be erased while you're still breathing. After the funeral, I tried to stay calm. I tried to be civil, even after the will had gutted me like a fish. I called the house, asked if I could pick up some of Mom and Dad's personal belongings, things that meant something to me. A photo album, a music box, my mother's locket. But the locks had already been changed. No one said it outright, but she'd made sure I was shut out, physically, legally, emotionally. Then came the whispers. People I'd known my whole life started avoiding eye contact. Old family friends stopped returning messages. When I reached out to our cousin Natalie for clarity, she just said, "I think your sister's really overwhelmed right now. Maybe give her space." Online, though, she didn't look overwhelmed. She looked radiant, standing in a silk shawl, lighting a candle at some children's shelter in Nepal. The caption said, "Legacy isn't about blood, it's about impact." Meanwhile, I was curled up on a secondhand futon in a rented basement, eating canned lentil soup under a flickering light bulb. She had told everyone I was unstable, that I wasn't thinking clearly, that grief had made me paranoid. She said it kindly, of course, in that perfectly rehearsed voice people always believed. "I'm worried about her," she probably said, hand on someone's shoulder. She's always been sensitive. But she wasn't worried. She was busy freezing the joint account weeks before Mom passed. Busy switching the family attorney to someone handpicked. Busy filing a revised estate directive and getting it signed while our mother could barely speak. When I asked about Mom's jewelry, I was told it had all been donated to auction. There wasn't even a pair of earrings left. She'd replaced my name with an organization, my presence with a narrative, my pain with a headline. And no one, not even the people who used to call me Annie with affection, seemed to question it. That was the part that hurt the most. Not just the betrayal, but how easily the world accepted it. She turned my grief into a marketing campaign. And I turned her fake benevolence into evidence. You might think that was rock bottom, but what if I told you that was just the silence before the storm? Stay with me, because what I discovered next changed everything. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself watching her on Forbes Women. There she was, framed in soft light, every strand of her perfect hair in place, speaking about legacy and empowerment like she was some sainted oracle. But it wasn't her words that caught me. It was what sat quietly behind her, on the second shelf of her office. A crystal award with a silver-etched logo I hadn't seen in years. Omega Fund. A name that once made headlines across the globe for one of the largest financial laundering scandals of the last decade. I knew it because I had studied it. Back when I was preparing for an exhibition on corruption in the art world, I'd pored over every detail of that case. That logo had vanished from the internet after the firm collapsed. But now, here it was, sitting in her office like a trophy. Why would she display it, unless she was proud of something no one was supposed to see? That image stayed with me. It gnawed at me. I began looking deeper, not out of hope, but instinct. The Eloise Foundation, her charity, claimed to operate in 12 countries. But their registration numbers didn't exist in 6. Their donations didn't match reported grant disbursements. Some of their largest listed donors had no public profiles, no digital traces, no past. They were ghosts. I reached out to Sam, an old friend from art school who now worked in crypto compliance. Years ago, I helped him secure a gallery residency he'd nearly lost. He owed me a favor. I told him I needed to trace a pattern, quiet and fast. No names, just movements. He didn't ask why. He just said, "Send me what you've got." And so began the unraveling. Transaction histories led us to shell companies with layered ownership, IP addresses connected to fabricated donation portals, overseas accounts routed through 3 different tax havens. Every thread, no matter how tangled, looped back to her. People called me scattered, said I lacked direction, that I was the broke artist with nothing to show for my years of work. But it was that same eye for pattern, for detail, for hidden meaning, that let me see the truth she thought no one ever would. I wasn't confused, I wasn't delusional, and I damn sure wasn't dead. I was just getting ready. You've seen her lies. Now, are you ready to see her empire tremble? This next move, I didn't scream, I didn't fight. I just let the truth do what it always does. I didn't confront her. I didn't give her the chance to perform, to twist her lips into that feigned expression of hurt, to spin one more web laced with tears and practiced humility. I had learned by then, people like her don't tell the truth when they feel cornered. They double down. So I stayed quiet. And I prepared. I compiled everything. The financial inconsistencies, the missing registrations, the chain of shell companies and dummy donors, the IPs that didn't match. The award from the Omega Fund, proudly displayed like a relic from a private victory. Page after page, I built the case, meticulously, like a mosaic, 110 pages of raw truth. Then I sent it, anonymously, to the Global Transparency Alliance. Their inbox was known for swallowing whistleblowers whole and spitting out investigations that shattered regimes. I also sent a second copy, this one with a personal note, to a journalist I trusted in Europe, a woman who had once brought down a fake medical nonprofit with nothing more than a FOIA request and a steady voice. And then I waited. It took a week. The headline broke just before midnight Eastern Time. By dawn, it had gone global. Philanthropy or fraud? The dark side of the Eloise Foundation. Within hours, it was picked up by 6 languages, reshared by every major watchdog, and dissected by legal analysts on morning news shows. Screens flashed with charts of money trails and blurred out testimonies from anonymous insiders. I wasn't one of them. I didn't need to be. She was at a gala in Vienna when the story dropped, flanked by celebrities, donors, and cameras. The moment her phone buzzed and she glanced down, the shift in her expression was instant, pale, frozen, mechanical, like someone had shut off the lights behind her eyes. Reporters, sensing blood, circled with questions she couldn't answer fast enough. I didn't need to be in the room. I had already delivered the blow. Clean, quiet, irrefutable. She built her empire on secrets. I turned those secrets into headlines. If you've stayed with me this far, get ready. Because what happens next isn't just satisfying. It's justice, delivered cold and clear. And trust me, you'll want to see her face when it hits. She called me. For the first time in months. No introduction, no apology. Just her voice, tight, sharp, and trembling. And, "What did you do?" I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "You called the wrong person. Try asking yourself." And then I hung up. By that point, it had already begun. Her charity had been suspended across 3 countries. Her accounts were frozen. Government agencies in 2 continents had launched investigations. The walls were closing in fast, and she didn't even know where the cracks had started. Then came the fallout. The family lawyer, our parents' trusted advisor for over 20 years, released a public statement. He claimed he had been misled, that the version of the will he'd been pressured to submit was not what our parents had originally signed. He used the word coerced. That alone sparked another legal inquiry. Next, her accolades started to vanish. Awards revoked. Gala invitations quietly rescinded. One of her biggest donors issued a public demand for an independent audit of her entire foundation. Her executive assistant resigned without comment. And then her fiancé, yes, the one she flaunted across every glossy magazine, announced that the wedding would be postponed until further notice. All the things she thought she owned, respect, admiration, control, they turned on her like knives. For someone so rehearsed, so practiced in public relations, she didn't know what to do when the cameras turned on her for the wrong reasons. Her expression in the leaked photos said everything. Pale, dazed, lips parted, but no words coming out. She looked like a woman trying to wake from a nightmare, only to realize it was all real. She had spent years trying to erase me, my name, my place, my dignity. She thought she'd buried me with fake smiles and forged papers. But in the end, it wasn't my name that disappeared. It was hers. You thought that was the knockout? Not yet. What comes now is the masterpiece. My final brushstroke in a portrait she'll never be able to erase. I didn't celebrate her downfall with champagne or headlines. I opened an art gallery. It was a small space, barely big enough for 24 people at a time, tucked between a florist and a bookstore. I called the exhibit Her Shadow. No press release, no interviews, just a quiet announcement, a single black and white flyer, and a door that stayed open past midnight. Inside, the walls were lined with portraits, except these weren't painted. They were collages, each one assembled from shredded financial statements, redacted bank reports, fragments of offshore transfers. Pieced together, they formed her face, her quotes, her smile. The same smile that once made investors open their wallets and audiences rise to their feet. The centerpiece was titled Inheritance. 2 canvases side by side, one made from the original will, copied and mounted piece by piece. The other from the forged version, the one that erased me. Viewers stood in front of it for minutes at a time, reading the highlighted discrepancies, the signatures that didn't match, the dates that contradicted each other. I never said a word that night. I didn't need to. By the second evening, the exhibit had gone viral. People started connecting the dots, recognizing the names in the cutouts, whispering rumors until those whispers turned into confirmation. I didn't reveal who I was, but someone else did. A journalist posted a single sentence online. The artist behind Her Shadow is the sister she tried to erase. Suddenly, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the failure anymore. I was the footnote they finally noticed. She spent years controlling the story, curating a public image so polished it could blind. But I told the truth in silence, in cut paper and glue, in the language she could never manipulate. She tried to write me out of the story, so I made the story hers, her crimes, her lies, her legacy, on display. I didn't sign a single piece, but everyone knew who wrote it. Now that the world knows who she really is, you might wonder, what became of me? Let me take you into the quiet aftermath, where the loudest thing is finally peace. I haven't gotten the inheritance back, not yet. The estate is still tied up in legal disputes, and every week brings a new document, a new hearing date, a new delay. But I'm no longer waiting for that to define me. I've stopped seeing it as a symbol of what I lost, because somewhere along this road, while sifting through the debris of betrayal and silence, I found something else, something far more valuable: peace. I now live in a tiny studio nestled beside a quiet river. The kind of place that doesn't show up on GPS maps, where the mornings smell like dew and coffee, and the nights hum softly with wind slipping through tree branches. The space is small, just one long room with floor-to-ceiling windows, a sink that gurgles when it rains, and walls that are slowly filling up with sketches, brushstrokes, and quiet memories. I teach again, art mostly, sometimes creative writing. My students are an odd mix: teenagers trying to escape the pressure of perfection, retirees who always wanted to paint but never had the chance, one or two women who carry their stories in their spines, like I did. They come with wounds, visible or not, and I give them brushes, silence, and space. And in that shared silence, we begin to mend. Last week, during a watercolors class, a 12-year-old girl looked up from her canvas and asked me, with all the innocence in the world, "Does losing everything hurt?" I paused for a long time before answering. Then I smiled and said, "Yes, but some things are worth more than everything." She blinked, then nodded, and went back to her painting, 3 wildflowers reaching toward a crooked sun. I don't need applause or apologies. What I needed was to remember who I was before the money, before the manipulation, before the headlines. And here, in this quiet studio by the water, I'm finding her again. Not in grand gestures, but in the ordinary. The smell of turpentine, the hiss of tea being poured, the weight of a brush in my hand. My niece came to visit me recently. She's taller now, sharper too. She asked if she could hang one of my old paintings in her room. When I asked which one, she held up a faded canvas I'd forgotten I'd even given her years ago. A portrait of a girl standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out at the sea. The colors were muted, the strokes rough, but her hands trembled slightly as she held it. She said she wanted to wake up to it every morning, that it reminded her that bravery didn't have to be loud. I didn't cry, not then. I waited until she'd left and the door clicked shut behind her. And then I let myself feel it all. Not grief, not bitterness. Just the quiet swell of a wound that had finally scabbed over. Some days, I go out to the little garden I planted behind the studio. It's not much, just a few rows of herbs and wildflowers, a bench under a willow tree, and a cat that showed up one day and never left. I named her Echo. She follows me around like she's guarding something sacred. In the evenings, I sit by the window and drink chamomile tea, watching the sky dim into watercolor hues. There's a stillness now I never thought I'd know. Not emptiness, stillness. The kind that arrives only after a storm has spent itself, when the air is clean and heavy with the scent of earth and beginnings. No one asks me about my sister anymore. Not really. Her face no longer fills the screens. Her name, once whispered in admiration, has been reduced to court documents and deleted websites. But when people talk about the exhibit, their voices lower with reverence. Not for the scandal, but for the silence that followed. For the way truth made its way into the light, not with fire, but with fragments and glue and a woman who refused to be erased. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a breeze slipping through a half-open window, a painting hung in a child's room, a garden blooming in soil someone once said was barren. And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Not rich, not famous, but rooted, whole. Because she tried to take everything, and all she really did was give me back myself. You've seen my healing, but what about her downfall? Oh, don't worry. Karma didn't need a courtroom, just a mirror she can't look into anymore. She didn't go to prison. That much, I'll admit. No mugshot, no orange jumpsuit, no courtroom gasps or handcuffs clicked onto trembling wrists. The legal web she spun was too intricate, her lawyers too expensive, and the evidence, though damning, only pierced so far without the blood she had always managed to keep off her hands. But freedom is a cruel illusion when the world no longer looks you in the eye. She lost everything else. The charity was dismantled within weeks. Every project frozen, every initiative exposed for what it truly was, a hollow front with offshore fingerprints. Grants revoked, tax exemptions dissolved, her name scrubbed from glossy brochures and gala invitations. International watchdogs blacklisted her in over a dozen countries. I read somewhere that she's banned from entering Singapore, Australia, and most of the European Union. Her speaking engagements vanished. Book deals died before the ink touched the paper. Even her carefully cultivated followers on social media, those who once worshipped her impact, fell silent. One by one, the likes stopped. The shares dried up. Her last post sat alone, a candle emoji under a caption about hope, buried beneath comments demanding accountability. Now she lives in a one-bedroom rental apartment in a neighborhood that doesn't appear on tourist maps. The lease is under the name of her former assistant, the only one who hadn't testified against her, though he no longer answers her calls. It said she sleeps on a fold-out couch, keeps the curtains closed all day, and hasn't been photographed publicly in months. But I saw her. Once. Just once more. It was outside the courthouse. Not for trial. Those days were over. It was a deposition, quiet and procedural, no cameras inside. But outside, they waited. Dozens of reporters, some familiar, some new, microphones thrust forward like weapons, the kind of noise that used to thrill her. She didn't glow this time. Her suit didn't fit right. Her hair was limp, the roots darker than I remembered. Mascara streaked under her eyes, not from crying, but from rushing, maybe sweating, maybe hoping she could still control the optics. She held a folder, clutched it really, like it could shield her from the questions, the stares, the truth. That's when she saw me. We didn't speak. There was no need. I stood behind the line of cameras, far enough not to be part of the scrum, close enough to be seen. Her eyes flicked up, scanned the crowd, and landed on mine. And for a moment, everything paused. She didn't frown. She didn't smile. Her face didn't move at all. But I saw it, that flicker, the collapse that happens behind the mask. She was the one who turned away first. I stayed. Watched her hurry, down the steps, her shoes catching on the uneven pavement, the press following her like wolves that had finally caught her scent. But there was no grace in her anymore, no script, just a woman who once orchestrated every narrative, now fleeing from one she couldn't control. They say humiliation is only temporary, but I don't think that's true. Not for her, because shame lingers in the spaces silence can't cover. In the empty inbox, the friends who don't return calls, the way people whisper when they pass you in the store. She crafted her world out of reputation and illusion. And when those were stripped away, she had nothing left to stand on. She used to teach people how to manage perception. She gave TED Talks on narrative building, wrote articles about the power of authenticity. But in the end, it wasn't her fall that undid her. It was the fact that the world finally saw who she really was. And once the curtain drops, no one claps for the villain pretending to be a saint. She never answered for what she did to me. Not in court, not in a letter, not even in a word spoken aloud. But that's the thing about justice. It doesn't always arrive with a verdict. Sometimes it walks in quietly and takes everything that can't be rebuilt. She taught the world about image. I taught the world about evidence. And now, she lives with both. You see, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it blooms quietly, through legacy, truth, and the lives we touch long after the war is over. I didn't set out to build a legacy. I just didn't want another girl to grow up thinking that being the black sheep meant being broken. That being misunderstood or silenced or left out of a will was some kind of evidence she didn't belong in this world. That's how the Second Voice Project was born. A modest scholarship fund, tucked between art classes and quiet evenings by the river, designed for young women who had been told, by family, by circumstance, by life itself, that their voice didn't matter. It wasn't a grand gesture, it didn't make headlines, but it made a difference. The name came from a sketch I'd once drawn in my studio, years before everything fell apart. 2 faces, one in shadow, one emerging. It felt right. The second voice isn't always the loudest, but it's the one that survives. I didn't build the fund out of revenge. I didn't need another takedown or spotlight. I did it because silence, when wielded with care, becomes something softer than rage. It becomes strength. The kind of strength that passes between hands in a quiet classroom. That lives in the eyes of a girl who's just realized she's allowed to take up space. I don't talk about my sister anymore. Not in interviews, not in essays. I don't mention the trial or the articles or the gala where her world unraveled. People try to bring her up sometimes, especially when they recognize my name. But I redirect. I smile. I ask about their daughters, their paintings, their dreams. On the anniversary of our parents' passing, I light 2 candles on the windowsill of my new studio. They flicker against the glass. Not for grief, but for clarity. I don't mourn anymore. I remember. Not just who they were, but who I became when I finally stopped needing them to believe in me. A few months ago, my niece, the daughter of our brother, who stayed quiet during it all, but never turned his back, visited me. She's 16 now, all elbows and opinions. She found one of my old sketches rolled up in the closet and begged to hang it above her bed. "You drew this?" she asked, wide-eyed. "You should teach." "I do," I told her. "I do." Some nights, I sit by the window with a cup of jasmine tea, watching the garden bloom a little wilder than the year before. There's a peace to unruly things, a beauty in what grows beyond permission. People sometimes ask if I ever got the inheritance back, if the will was overturned, if I finally claimed what was mine. But the truth is, what was mine was never in those pages. It wasn't land or money or a family name. It was the right to tell my own story, to exist fully and freely without needing to be chosen by anyone else. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's realizing I no longer need my name in her narrative to feel whole. She can keep her version of the past, tucked away behind gated memories and guarded interviews. I've built something else entirely, something living, something that breathes. My legacy isn't a courtroom win. It's the girl who wrote me a letter last week, saying she applied to art school because she saw one of my collages online. It's the student who stuttered through her first poem and now reads it aloud with her head held high. It's every woman who walks through my gallery and sees her own resilience reflected back. I once believed justice looked like retribution, but now I know. It looks like growth, like softness returning to the edges, like choosing to build even after everything's been taken. The story didn't end with her downfall. It ends here, with a hand on a teacup, a breeze through the garden, and the quiet, steady beat of a voice finally heard. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If my story moved something in you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because this world needs more stories that speak the truth.